after tonight, we're getting together for only 2 more of these, only 2 more selection shows after tonight, alongside Aslan Hajavandi, the director of digital media for Warchant and Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang, and this is the live reaction show for the College Football Playoff. We'll be joined in a little bit by our own founder and administrator, the man who signs our checks. He is Gene Williams, and we'll have a reaction to where Florida State stands in the college football rankings, which will be released here shortly. As the broadcast goes live, so do we. Aslan, what's going on, man? Happy Thanksgiving week to you.
Yeah, likewise, Tom. How are things on the east side?
Things are going okay. Are you making a trip down to the 727 for Thanksgiving?
I don't know. I'm game time decision. My mom's out of town. I think my brother wants me to come hang out with him and his girlfriend's family, but I don't know about that. So I might just kind of hang tight in Tallahassee and just relax, man. Just unplug. It's been a crazy last few weeks ever since the Pitt game. You know,
there's a lot of travel back and forth, especially for you. You're one of the editorial staff that makes the roadies, so I fully understand that. They've got Kirk on. He always joins it via remote. They don't make him travel to Bristol because he's big time, so he's on the screen with the desk, going through the storylines of the last week. Since the last time we signed on here on Warchant TV for a selection show, obviously devastating news for Florida State that lends context, a lot of context to what's probably going to happen tonight, which is Jordan Travis goes down for the season. He had suffered a lower leg injury. Florida State has now, in the last 24, 36 hours, confirmed that Jordan Travis' playing career at Florida State is over. And that is going to, I think, as it's rolling on the national broadcast right now, the clip of Jordan being carted off the field for the final time on Bobby Bowden Field, which is still something that just leaves you in shock and leaves you numb. That is going to be a big part of the discussion around Florida State and around Washington. So, Aslan, what I'll ask you before we even entertain the idea about injury dropping Florida State, just watching last weekend and seeing Washington escape with a 2-point win over Oregon State, do you think that Washington would have jumped Florida State anyhow this week?
Yeah, via them winning. I mean, I know you say escape. I know that was almost a little bit tongue in cheek, but Oregon State's a pretty good team. Weather was a little bit nasty. It was on the road. They kind of, they got the first down they needed to salt the clock away. So I just think that stacks up at least recency bias, some more quality wins than Florida State has had. I think a lot of people might think that the Oregon win that Washington has is more quality than the LSU game. But I think it's the recency bias of it more. So it's, that didn't happen last night either, the Oregon win, but that just seems to be at the front of everyone's mind. Arizona's looked pretty good at the Oregon State win on top of that. Meanwhile, Florida State's just kind of really hanging on to the LSU win with Duke looking the way they have ever since they got pummeled in the fourth quarter in Doak on that night.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where in the preseason, I was the broken record about get out of jail free card in September if you go 4-0. Didn't expect both Clemson and LSU to amass 7 losses combined between the two programs. So obviously what Florida State's defense did to LSU carries. If you ever want to talk and puff your chest out about Florida State's defense, I think you start with the second half against LSU. But again, that's a 3-loss football program. They're top 15 in the college football rankings. But Washington's resume to me, Aslan, I think, as long as they got out of Dodge last weekend with a win, I think they were going to jump FSU independent of what happens to Jordan Travis. And again, Florida State should still be within striking distance tonight, which is to say big noon Saturday, Michigan, Ohio State, the loser of that game would drop below Florida State. So if you take care of business, you go 13-0, it's going to be right in your crosshairs. I see as the rankings are being released right now that Clemson is back in the top 25. They are now number 24 in the country, just this side of 11-0 Liberty. So, the committee says 4-loss Clemson, no problem. They're a better football team than Liberty, and Clemson's been on a bit of a run, Aslan, the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, big quality winning is that 7-4 Clemson team. We're they get the SEC effect almost, so we'll take it though. I mean, Tennessee 7-4, they're 21st, so that about makes sense. It's gonna be crazy that this weekend. Usually, you find yourself. We're not big ACC guys. It's not in our DNA. Anybody watching the show that's an ACC fan, we just don't cheer for each other the way that the SEC does. But this weekend, you usually do. You want to see Louisville beat Kentucky. You want to see Georgia Tech beat Georgia. Especially now you want to see Clemson beat South Carolina, hang on to that spot. And you definitely want to see Louisville take out Kentucky. So they're going to be ranked even higher than they are now, possibly.
Now rolling into the top 20, Oregon State drops 5 spots for their 3rd loss of the season. They're 8-3. They're number 16. Notre Dame is at 18. That's another team that Florida State's been looking at, comp schedules like opponents with Duke, with Clemson playing Notre Dame, and then obviously the Ohio State comp earlier. But Florida State's argument has weakened. Their stance has weakened. There's no doubt about that. I think it's fully expected if they go down to number 5. I think I would be shocked, Aslan, if they stayed at number 4. Would you say shocked is the right word for you? Mildly surprised? If Florida State did not move tonight, where'd your head be?
I mean, I would say, I don't want to say shocked because then people might think that that's like me rooting against Florida State or something in this situation, but like, I'm just trying to be pretty impartial in this. Yeah. I think Washington has a better resume right now. I think Florida State with Jordan Travis is a better team than Washington. They no longer have Jordan Travis. But if they win their last 2 games, they'll be just as deserving, I think, as Washington to be in the top 4 when it's all said and done. LSU, Washington runs the table.
If they do, man, that's one hell of a resume. It's impenetrable. Even if you do think that win over Oregon, the first one, it was shaky, this would imply that they did it again. LSU is the top-ranked 3-loss team in the country. They climb up 1 spot to number 14, so FSU's resume gets a little bit bolstered there as they are making their way slowly into the top 10. They like to do this dance, especially as we get closer to the final ranking. They want to make sure that everybody tunes in. Just like you are here on Warchant TV. He's Aslan. I'm Tom. Welcome in. Hit the thumbs up button. More of you climbing in right now, upwards of about 500 of you. We welcome you to a Thanksgiving week presentation of the college football ranking, live reaction show, as we like to call it. So as they are crawling towards the place where Florida State comes into the discussion, Aslan, just wanted to get your thoughts. You were out of practice today. Tate Rodemaker's first practice that the media can observe as the starting quarterback for Florida State. But what were some general observations that you had when you were out there as Florida week is on, man? It's Tuesday of Florida week.
Mike was at 11, which, he says we're going to be who we are. We're going to do what we do. But, this is one of those 2 games they talk about and motivates them throughout the offseason, the other one being the Miami game. So, he was agitated when things weren't going right, but he was also excited when things were going right. And like, there's this, when he goes like this, like he won't even say anything. The play will just happen. He'll just shoot both of his hands up in the air in pure triumph. And then afterwards he'll go run and like congratulate the players. He and his offensive assistants did that probably like 3 or 4 times on some run plays, against some scout looks, some 11-on-11 work. So, maybe this run game is going to have a renaissance or a little bit of a rejuvenation here. So that was the kind of biggest takeaway for me. And then Keon Coleman just making an absolutely absurd catch, which if you heard the the post-practice interview with Mike Norvell, was just stupid, as Coach Norvell said, stupid. I mean, he jumped up one hand, cradled it against the head of Greedy Vance, and, just was Keon Coleman, Bolitnikoff semifinalist.
That's not like Mike to do that too. Usually he downplays great plays. He's like, "Oh, it was a nice play," or he'll couch it. But when he says something like that, that it was for real. I wish I saw it with my own eyes.
Tom, real quick, sorry to interrupt you, but like looking at this right now, your biggest win is number 14 LSU if you're a Florida State fan. Washington beat number 15 Arizona, and they also beat Oregon, who's going to be top 8 probably. So I think I don't know. I know Arizona wasn't ranked when Washington played them, but I feel like maybe that's the first of maybe many clues that's going to show that Washington probably jumps Florida State here in 3-4 minutes when they unveil it. But Louisville, number 10, shout out to the Cards.
Interesting. Yeah, number 10, Mizzou with that near escape against Florida, 4th and 17, as they call it around those parts. 4th and 17. If you give out in, if you give up 16 yards in that situation, maybe 16 and a couple feet, you win the ball game. But you gave up 20, and so Mizzou stays at number 9. There's no change there in the top 10 for number 10 and number 9. Louisville is 1 win away, if you're looking for style points, if you're Florida State, to bolster the resume. And now I think that comes into play a little bit more. With Jordan Travis injured, I think that comes into play a little bit more. So if Louisville can beat Kentucky, they will be a top 10 team in the ACC championship game next week in Charlotte, which will be fascinating. Alabama comes in at number 8, which means it should go chalk here, I would think. 7 and 6 should be Texas and Oregon, respectively. Aslan, would you agree with that? I would expect to see that.
Yeah, I don't think Texas has done anything to jump ahead of Oregon, unless for some reason they've fallen more in love with the Alabama win.
Yeah,
which would be weird because, Alabama's gotten better, but, not that much. There you go, Texas 7.
Texas is number 7. Now, I mean, there's no way Florida State appears here at 6. I don't think they're going to do that with the injury concern. So we wait just a couple more minutes for them to roll out number 6. We all expect to see Oregon there, and then it gets down to the nitty-gritty. Again, if Florida State stands at 5, which I think most of us out there expect, everything is before them. It gets interesting as we get into post-Week 12 and conference championship discussions. but it looks like the Noles are going to get the help they needed. Miami helped Florida State by choking that game away this weekend with Louisville. Inside of 2 minutes, didn't manage those situations very well, Aslan. And Louisville was able to get out of there in front of a packed house of about 22,000 people in Miami with a 38-31 win. So the Cardinals are doing their part, and Oregon is, in fact, coming in at number 6. So we're about to get to the main event, but Florida State does appear to have one more resume bolstering opponent in Louisville as we await the top 5.
Looking at this top 10 and what we think the top 5 is going to be, how many of these teams wouldn't move if they lost their starting quarterback? Like if Oregon loses Bo Nix, everybody falls out of love with them. If Washington were to lose Michael Penix, everybody's off the Washington bandwagon. I think like maybe even Georgia with Carson Beck. I mean, I don't know who his backup is, but I feel like people probably hang tight with Georgia, probably hang tight with Ohio State and Michigan, but they're going to knock each other out. It's just Florida State's in a, I don't want to call it a unique position. I just think that a lot of teams around them probably wouldn't get benefit of the doubt they lost their quarterback, but too soon to do that right now. I would think anything that were to happen right now where Florida State drops, Tom, I think it's because what's happened on the field, resume stuff, and not Jordan. Yeah. But if they don't look great, maybe the next 2 weeks, then you start seeing some of that fairly or unfairly.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, so if, for example, Oregon was still where they are record-wise, but Bo Nix went down this past weekend, I think Texas and Alabama would probably jump them at that point. I think the committee would do that. There is precedent for the committee to use injury to explain away a loss or move a team up. In 2014, Oregon and Florida State were in this very position where Florida State had no losses, Oregon had 1 loss. And Jeff Long, who was everybody's favorite chairman of the committee, because that's the last time we were really watching these things, said Oregon's left tackle was hurt for a couple of weeks. That's a big deal. So now that he's back, we're moving them up. So there is precedent in the now this is the 10th year of the college football playoff. Time flies. But there is precedent for injuries to play a role in here, as they are vamping just a little bit more, thanks to everybody who's now we're about 650 strong, nearly 650 strong here on Warchant TV for the playoff reaction show. Welcome in. We'll be joined by Gene Williams in just a moment when the ranking becomes known, where Florida State stands in this top 5. They did not move Florida State below a team with 1 loss. We do know that much right now, but he's Aslan, I'm Tom. Director Ben behind the scenes working the board for us, and thank you to everybody who is in the chat and participating in the discussion. A quick note on Saturday on Warchant TV, the pregame show. We will have a live pregame show for Florida State down in the swamp that begins at 6 p.m., 1 hour before kickoff, 6 p.m. for the pregame show. Jeff Cameron and myself will take the lead here on Warchant TV. The postgame show 10 to 15 minutes after the game. All right. They usually do this graphic, Aslan, with 6 teams, 1 through 6, not 1 through 5, but they know what the discussion is going to be this week, FSU and Washington. And now they're doing the excruciating thing where they go from 1 to 5. So number 1 this week, no surprise, Georgia is in. I don't think we're going to see a change at 2 or 3, right? This goes Ohio State, Michigan, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, the Maryland win quality. But no, yeah, they're going to keep Ohio State, I think, at 2 at this point. Especially Notre Dame still being where they're at. Penn State still they're just outside the top 10, Penn State, for whatever reason. So those 2 wins more than just Michigan's 1 win against Penn State. So I'm sure they're glorifying Georgia right now. There we go. Ohio State 2.
Ohio State number 2. Look, I would drop Michigan down personally. Like I would actually prefer to see Washington 3, Michigan 4 in this situation, because Penn State's your best win. And the defense counts. Defensive scores count, but you get 2 safeties and a scoop and score on your way to a 7-point win over a 5-win Maryland team. I mean, what resume is that? Washington's resume is far superior to Michigan's resume, but okay, we'll see. Number 3 indeed is Michigan, so it sets up for a kickoff on Saturday at noon. That game is in the Big House this year, I do believe.
Correct.
So Ohio State and Michigan. Michigan laid the wood to Ohio State and Columbus last year. That was shortly, incidentally, after the Keg-tacular at the Corner Pocket Bar and Grill. Yeah. So it was a rowdy day.
2 in a row, actually. Michigan's taken it to Ohio State, but they're only 3-point favorite right now, and they're the weight of the world is weighing down on Michigan right now. They're in 2014 Florida State territory in terms of like the world rooting against them. So that's why I feel some sympathy for my guy Jim Harbaugh and Go Blue. But I'm in the minority, and I get it. I get everybody. They're cheaters. Blah 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 blah.
It feels
they haven't listen, like they run the ball all the time, Tom, but they don't do a good job of it. They're just like 3.5. I mean, 3 yards in a cloud of dust ain't going to win, but 3.5 will get you a first down. That's pretty much what they've been living by the last 2 weeks. So They got to do something impressive to get past Ohio State that we haven't seen here recently.
I feel like that game is a race to 24. I think that first to 24 wins that ball game. It's just going to be sloppy. A lot of
I think
defense.
42 is the point. I think is the total on that game, which they had, get 24-20 game. It falls kind of within the spread too. So
checks out. Here we go. We're still waiting. They're doing this thing. They're not doing blind resumes or anything. It's just a blank screen and the 4 and the 5 slot. Let's see. My guess is they'll go to number 4 first and reveal. And there it is. Washington is indeed officially number 4. Florida State has dropped to number 5 in this week's college football playoff top 25 rankings. I will say again, Aslan, I think if Jordan Travis had Jordan Travis finished the game, and it's the exact same scenario where they score 58 straight, I think this still happens.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
So they're gonna talk about this like it's the weight of the world. I don't think it has anything to do with, well, it now does, but it wouldn't have had anything to do with an injury. If Jordan Travis was healthy. Washington's resume at this point is better. Florida State is within striking distance of the top 4. I know that's not the sexy part of the discussion. We want Aslan flipping out. We want Gene Williams flipping out. But to me, this is just kind of a chalk situation. And Gene is waiting in the green room. Don't bring him on just yet, Director Ben. When the headset goes on, that's when the founder and administrator makes his way onto the screen.
Do we have anybody that's going to be able to listen to Norvell's interview that's coming up here? I mean, I might be able to, if you and Gene want to carry that, I might be able to plug one of my headphones into my other ear and hear what he's saying, because he's scheduled to be interviewed on this. So it'll be kind of interesting to hear him talk about it and, react to the news, which again, I mean, I'm going to believe when he also says like he doesn't care, because I don't think he does, because he knows that they valued the Miami win. I think this committee, Boo Kerrigan, said as much. I think they'll value a win at Florida with the backup quarterback. And I think if they can beat Louisville with their backup quarterback, they're going to value that as well. I mean, I was looking real quickly at Cardell Jones, because we keep hearing about that, right? Tom, 2014, Ohio State goes down to their third string quarterback, still makes it to the playoff, ends up winning the national title. Man, he did not look good. He was 5 of 9 against Illinois, 2 for 3 against Michigan, 12 of 17 against Wisconsin. And that wasn't great, but that was enough to keep them in the thick of making to the playoffs. So maybe Florida State doesn't even need style points. Maybe because other stuff around them will help, bolster their case here the next 2 weeks.
I think so. And then they just put the graphic on the screen with the 2 resumes. I mean, it's clear. It's okay. You could be a Nole and say that it's clear that Washington has the better resume at this point. You can also say that if Florida State goes 13-0, they should 100% be in the playoff. That's my personal take on it. But let me ask you, Aslan, do you think that if they go 13-0, it's a lock, or do you think that their shenanigans could be at play here in the next couple of weeks?
I mean, I don't want to be like, oh, you're an ESPN stooge, Aslan. You're listening to the narrative. I mean, it's close to a certainty. But I'm most worried about the Georgia-Alabama situation, where if Alabama barely beats Georgia, let's say 28-27 or something, would they think that both those teams are worthy of being in there? And if Washington goes undefeated, they're ahead of you right now. Hard to imagine you'll jump them by you beating Louisville and them beating Oregon. Yep. That's like that fear that you have. But I was asking Corey this on the podcast. Let me flip it to you. Is the best scenario for everybody to stay undefeated, Tom? Like Georgia stay undefeated. Obviously, your Big Ten champion will probably be undefeated. Washington stays undefeated. Florida State stays undefeated. And then it's a piece of cake. It's like, all right, there's 4 undefeated teams left. Boom, it's solved. We don't have to think about anything. Whereas if teams start losing, if Georgia loses, when you're like, well, they're the 2-time consecutive defending champions. They barely lost to Alabama. Then you just have to factor in Alabama versus Texas. And I know people are like, well, Florida State's undefeated in that situation. They're obviously going to jump ahead of everybody. Yeah, it's like, well, no, I think at that point, maybe they start really parsing all these things down to a really finite, granular degree, which might then make your resume come even under more scrutiny.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting way of putting it, because there's going to be a one-loss team that makes the college football playoff. We know that right now.
Not for sure, but it's very likely. I mean, it's to think that 4 Power 5 teams are going to go undefeated after 13 games. Hard to believe, but it could happen if the Big Ten champ, runs the table, Georgia runs the table, Florida State runs the table, and Washington runs the table.
Yeah, what I'm doing in my brain is I'm chalking up Oregon beating Washington, and that's probably unfair to Washington. That probably is, but it's just with what I've seen, I think that's going to be next Friday night, a rematch with an Oregon win, and you probably have one loss team in the field. I think what could make it dangerous, if anything, and I believe this in my heart of hearts, they go 13-0, they're going to the playoff. This isn't a discussion whether there are multiple one-loss teams in the SEC. I think they're going to be okay. The danger to me is if Texas drops out, because I feel like Alabama is held back by that head-to-head loss to Texas. There's this barrier that does not allow Alabama to cross into the discussion. But if Texas were to drop one, I don't think they'll do so this week, but if they were to drop the Big 12 championship game, suddenly Alabama is free to climb up the ranks a little bit quicker. And I think that the SEC factor, the respect for the SEC being what it is, a win over Georgia at that point does get a little squirrely. But I don't think even with a win over Georgia, the committee can ignore the head-to-head loss to Texas. I think Texas would have to slide up. If I'm a Texas fan and Bama beats Georgia in the SEC championship, I think we have first dibs in the playoff, not Alabama.
I know what you're saying, and it makes sense, but this process doesn't make sense. I would see Alabama jumping ahead. Gene needs to make sense of all this for us.
Yeah.
Can we bring the closer in from the bullpen? Is he ready? All
right, Gene, we've been blowing
warmed up.
Yeah, you decided to put the headset on. It's time to come in. What do you think about this ranking, Gene? Or do you want to address the SEC elephant in the room with Alabama before we get there?
Yeah, let's wait on that. Hey, look, I don't want FSU fans to get upset at me. I expected this, and I don't have a problem with Washington jumping Florida State in this poll. And I agree, their resume's better. It is. I mean, they've won. Now, I know 2 of the last 3 teams they beat are no longer ranked, but they beat 3 ranked teams in a row when they played them. They deserved it. And it's not really an issue. You know, we get down to the end of the day, the way this thing plays out, if Florida State keeps winning, the issue becomes what happens in the nightmare scenario if Washington wins. And I agree with you, Tom. I think Oregon's going to win that. So it makes a lot of this argument moot if that happens. But if Washington does win, and then the scenario happens where Alabama rolls in the SEC championship game, gets a narrow win over Georgia, and we've seen this SEC bias over and over and over again, and they're going to want to get the 2-time defending champions who've been the number 1 team in this poll in there somehow. And obviously you've got to put the SEC champions in there as well, and that's where it gets a little, as you said, squirrely, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we can say Florida State deserves to be in it. Absolutely, they do. They're undefeated. They're a Power 5 team. They're conference champions. They would have just beat a team. We're hoping, again, it would be made even worse if Louisville were upset by Kentucky this week. Mm-hmm. Then it gets even more squirrely. And I don't think, show points or whatever you're going to do is going to matter much this week. Florida beats Gainesville, down in Gainesville, they win. Everything's great. I do think it's going to matter in the championship game. So you're playing a number 10 because all the buzz is going to be on Alabama, again, hypothetically beating Georgia. But if you go out and you lay a whooping on a number 10, number 9 team and win a conference championship and go undefeated, that's going to be a really hard argument to push in that committee room. That the team that just had an impressive win against, let's say, a number 9 team to win a conference championship undefeated, we're going to push them out. I don't think they can do that. Anything can happen with this bunch. And I don't know I'm curious to see what Boo Kerrigan will say here when they talk to him about Washington jumping and all the thoughts, and maybe can read between the lines and see if he's trying to set this up for a one-loss team jumping Florida State potentially. I still think FSU holds its fortunes in its own hand. But again, that if that nightmare scenario happens and Louisville loses and they struggle in that game, I'm telling you, the door is open for some very upset FSU fans because I don't trust the committee when it comes to the SEC bias.
Well, that's the whole thing. Yeah, I think that we can agree, and I'll take some liberties here, guys, but that I'm making a logical argument that Florida State should be in and be a lock at 13-0. But what Aslan said is correct. This process makes no sense. These people make no sense. Their logic makes no sense. So I could make a great ironclad, watertight argument, and then the committee's like, no, we choose not to. Because it happened in 2014, Gene, as you put it on the channel last week, where that's an undefeated Florida State team. It seems like in subsequent years, the committee gives credit to reputation as a reigning national champion to other programs in the way they did not to Florida State in 2014, the first year of the playoff, when they were number 4 entering the final week of the college football playoff ranking. So they pick and they choose. We all understand that. I personally, guys, had to click off the live screen when I saw Kirk clearly making an argument that people are getting fired up about in the chat. You just see that expression on his face. We've all done a lot of broadcasting where it looks like he's maybe taking a side that might be on a script. I don't know. That's an allegation that I'm throwing out there. but it's almost like he's saying something that he doesn't fully believe in his heart of hearts about teams jumping Florida State. That's the way it felt, so I clicked off that screen. Gene, let me ask you this, and Aslan, feel free to chime in after Gene. Do you think they threw Florida State a bone there when they compared Florida State's resume and Michigan's resume? Because I didn't expect to see that after the Washington-Florida State comparison, but there's a graphic on the screen with Michigan and Florida State with the resume comparison, and they're pretty much the same. Do you think that that's a legitimate bone that ESPN was throwing, or is it an empty gesture because they know that the Big Ten game of the weekend is going to, this will be moot by next week anyway? What do you think?
No, I was a little bit. I think that was a good sign. And there were some, I don't know if you guys were doing the show. I was trying to listen to, there was some argument about it. And a good point was made about, they agree Washington with the resume should jump up. At the same point, they're making the argument, if we're going to do that's the criteria, why doesn't Michigan move down?
Yep.
They beat absolutely nobody. They've looked like crap the last 2 weeks. They have no business being number 3 right now. Florida State and Washington have much better resumes than they do. Why are they ranked that high? So here's a situation where the committee is being hypocritical in my mind by they're not comparing apples to apples, or they're doing 2 different criteria. I don't know what it is, just because it's Michigan, I guess, why they're getting this resume bump over the other teams. Other than the fact they beat the crap out of a bunch of bad teams when they were probably cheating in the process anyway. So other than that, I really don't understand that whole thing. So no, I was a little surprised they did that, but I mean, they made some very good points, which shows some of the problems with the committee doing that. And I hope that's something they do ask Boo Kerrigan about afterwards. Why is Washington being rewarded for looking good, but Michigan's not being docked? I mean, that doesn't seem right.
Aslan, do you think that's an olive branch or an empty gesture? What do you think when they put up Florida State next to Michigan on the screen tonight?
Opens the door, right?
Yeah.
Opens the door, but it also, the door shuts on Saturday if they beat Ohio State. That'll give them all the ammunition they need to remain wherever they're going to be in this top 4. So, gave us something good to talk about for 2 minutes, though. So we appreciate the content, Kirk and boys. Let me ask you guys, just where are we at in terms of if Oregon does beat Washington, Alabama does beat Georgia, then you get Texas with 1 loss, Georgia with 1 loss, Alabama with 1 loss, Oregon with 1 loss. In that situation, we feel probably good about Florida State, whoever wins the Big Ten. Like how would you rank the 1-loss teams in that scenario, guys?
I'll start. I think Oregon at that point, because Oregon has bludgeoned top 20 college football playoff teams when they play them, save for Washington. And am I allowed to look at the game and the way the game played? Should I dock Oregon for their coach being nuts and going for it inside the 5 on 4th down twice, or being nuts again and just not punting with under 2 minutes to go to ice that game away and let his defense play? Or do I give them credit because I think they were actually the better team on balance? It's a tough call, but I think Oregon's resume outside of the Washington loss is as good as anybody's. I mean, have we forgotten that Alabama had 3 points into the second half against USF? I mean, have we totally forgotten about that?
Of course, they can forget. You let that go.
And Texas beat them by 2 scores in their own backyard. With Texas, they're always suspect until they prove dominance otherwise. To me, which is interesting. I'm probably, as we do in this particular exercise, talk out of both sides of our mouth. I just think Oregon's the better team, so I would put Oregon ahead of the other 2. If you're saying Oregon, Texas, and Alabama, where would Georgia slot in though in that scenario? That's a toughie. I don't know where I'd put Georgia, but I know Oregon would probably be ahead of the pack. I don't think you can have Georgia lose in the SEC championship and they still slot ahead of Oregon. I don't think that's fair. Gene, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you get in a really slippery slope and an uncomfortable situation where you start putting non-conference champions with the same record as a conference champion. It doesn't rub right. Those conference championship games have to mean something, and it really wouldn't in that situation. So I agree with you, Tom. I think Oregon, obviously, would have a win over now what is the number 4 ranked team, and for a conference champion. So I mean that would have to weigh a lot. So that would go in there, just like Alabama, same thing. If they were to beat Georgia and be a 1-loss team, obviously that would weigh a lot too. And they'd be conference champions beating the number 1 team. So I think in those situations, those teams winning their conference championships with 1 win are in. Yeah, the issue we have is because will Georgia be given a lot of weight being a 1-loss team when they're not a conference championship? I don't think they should. I don't think most people think they should, but again, we go back to the argument again about how much weight are they going to put on being an SEC powerhouse versus a team that's undefeated without its starting quarterback.
Gene, I know you come bearing gifts tonight, and we'll get to that in just a moment. It's not the Christmas season, but Gene is a very giving person, and we're going to tell you about that in just a minute. But I want to get some short answers here before we do that. So your choices are yes, no, it depends. No explanation. It's just yes, no, it depends. If Florida State goes 13-0, Aslan, if Florida State goes 13-0, are they a lock for the playoff?
It depends.
Oh, Gene.
I'm going to go on the odds and say they're in.
Okay. All right. It's a yes. All right. I say yes as well. That is what we're watching for the next couple of weeks. Again, warchant.com will document every moment along the way. It's not just about football. Basketball got a ranked win tonight. Way to go.
Yes.
Noles, they beat Colorado 77-71. That game took about 74 hours to complete, but the good guys won. Florida State now 4-1 on the season. That is 14 straight overtime victories for Florida State. An NCAA record extended. Their last overtime loss was in January of 2018. Unbelievable run when they get to the extra 5 minutes. Florida State comes away with a victory. Of course, for the right to go to the College Cup on Friday night for the soccer program. They play, I believe it's 5:30 on Friday night against Pitt. This is one of those times where everything is flying left and right, including recruiting. Florida State has a top 3 class. You want to get involved with inside information on the recruiting front, team documenting, reporting from Aslan, from Ira, from Corey, from Gene, from myself, Matt Lasser, everybody on staff puts it all together for you. We now unveil a brand new way to enjoy warchant.com, and we're calling it Warchant Gold. That's right, Warchant Gold. It's the top tier way to be a member of warchant.com. That's all I get to say because this is Gene's brainchild. Gene, tell us about Warchant Gold.
Yeah, I was always trying to think of a better way to enhance users' experience, and this is based on a lot of feedback, talking to customers over the years. And one thing I get a lot of complaints about are ads. So I went on 3 and said, is there a way we can offer something to our fans where they can get an ad-free experience on Warchant? But I also thought that's not enough. We're going to ask them to pay a little bit more to do this. Obviously, we can't just, as much I'd like to just give it away, but unfortunately, websites nowadays, when you go to them, you're going to be besieged with ads. So, okay, but what else can we give them? Well, we work with our partners at Garnet Gold. Normal Warchant subscribers get 10% off. You upgrade to the gold level, you're now going to get 15% off all of your purchases. And now the really fun thing that we have created, some people asked me this week, what is this Renegade Room? It's a new message board on our forum, so you'll have exclusive access to the Renegade Room. Now, what this is, it's just not a normal message board. This is going to be weekly AMAs, Ask Me Anything, or AWAs. We call them Ask Warchant Anything. We'll have staff in there every week, a staff member in there to answer your questions, and you'll have exclusive access to them. So we'll tell you what you need to know. You'll get direct access to us. In addition to On3, we'll bring On3 experts in there, recruiting experts, that kind of thing. We'll get Chad Simmons in there, all kind of people to interact with you. And we've been working closely with Battle's End to get some student athletes in there as well. So you will have exclusive access for some AMAs with some student athletes from time to time. So some really cool stuff. And good timing there, Tom. I was about to transition into it, or Ben, whoever put that new screen
Director
up.
Ben. That's Director Ben all the way.
Our introductory special, we're rolling it out. We figured, you know what? It's Black Friday's coming up, Cyber Monday, so let's give them even more of a discount. So for the next few days until Cyber Monday, 40% off this upgraded subscription. So I believe it works out. Now, if you have an existing subscription, it's pretty easy. You just go to your profile, you hit subscription, you go upgrade. And I think it works out to, if you're an annual, I think it's $29.95 for an entire year with the discount. I think if a monthly, I think it works out to $299 more a month. So you're really not paying much. Just that Garnet Gold discount alone will pay for that easily, because I'm sure you make all purchases there and all this other cool stuff. So yeah, you got in there just, and if you're not a member, if you want to become a member, go right to this. You just use the code FSU Gold and sign up for a subscription. And you do it in the next few days, you will get 40% off the gold membership. So it's a really cool thing, Tom. I'm glad we're able to do this for our users, subscribers, and hopefully I'll have to deal with less of those emails to me about pesky ads they have to deal with all the time. Because if you sign up for this, those ads are a thing of the past. A really clean experience on warchant.com, and all those extra perks as well.
Yeah, it should be noted, too, that On3 sites, we're a part of the On3 network. We understand that, and we enjoy all the spoils when it comes to recruiting intel from the national analysts and a lot of perks from On3. No other On3 site has a subscription tier quite like this. So Gene was fighting for you to get the ad-free experience, and for your support for the ad-free experience, 5% extra off of every single one of your Garnet and Gold purchases in addition to that extra access. And so as we roll on this week towards one of the biggest games of the year, for me personally, it is the biggest game of the year, the one that always matters the most, Florida State at Florida.
I think Jeff would disagree with you.
Yeah. It depends on when you were here, man. My undergrad, we didn't. It was 2006. 21-14 was the final. That's the closest Florida State ever sniffed a victory over the Gators when I was in undergrad. It was a very sad time. So when you can run it up against them, that's what you do. And hopefully Tate Rodemaker and Florida State can do that this week. If they do, they likely will face a top 10 Louisville program if it goes chalk based upon betting odds. How rocky, Aslan, do you think the road is going to be between now and the final college football playoff selection show, which is just 2 Sundays from now? This season has flown by, but 2 Sundays from now, we're going to know where Florida State is playing, if they are in the playoff or they're not. You think this is going to be a bumpy ride, or do you feel the faith as we get into Thanksgiving week that Florida State is going to ride and make it easy over the next couple of weeks?
Florida Tate, right? Florida Tate is what we're going to be. Just some things to pass along from the college football playoff show that's on ESPN right now. They did do the chaos scenario where the Big Ten champs undefeated, Florida State's undefeated, and then Oregon beats Washington, Alabama beats Georgia. You know, Kirk said that he would put in that situation Oregon and Texas in, which is crazy to sound to say that you're not going to put the SEC champion in. That was shocking. And they're speaking to Boo Kerrigan right now about Florida State dropping. He said there's no impact at all with Jordan Travis going out. Said, quote, Reese, I got a lot of dudes out there on the field. But he did ask them, you know, have they talked at all about what that could mean for the future, them not having Jordan Travis? And he did admit that the next couple of weeks are going to be important for Florida State, going into Gainesville, playing Louisville. So, you know, maybe style points ultimately are going to be a thing. And then he was also asked about whether or not they've had discussions about could a one-loss team jump an undefeated team. And he kind of had a sheepish grin and said it's been a lot of active, animated conversations, but then kind of took a political stance and said, you know, didn't commit to them, you know, adopting one way or the other on that spectrum. So
that's interesting. Okay. So he's saying that style points for Florida State matter is basically what he was willing to infer. Okay.
Maybe not style points so much as, I mean, is it style points if Florida State, you know, you can't win 17-13 against Florida and be on a pick six and a kickoff return, you know? I mean,
yep.
I don't want to protect these guys. I know we're all after blood and screw everybody involved with ESPN right now, but I think we all can recognize that Florida State probably does need to look a certain way with Tate Rodemaker to make you feel like they're A, one of the 4 best teams in the country, and B, one of the 4 most deserving teams to be allowed into this 4-team playoff.
Yeah. And Gene, there's pressure on Florida State in that situation because Florida gives up everything to everybody defensively. So it's not like you're going down in the swamp to face a top 20 defense. And if you get out of there with a 21-13 win, you've done your job. I guess maybe if you can, Gene, can you pinpoint a total that Florida State should cross or a way they should look in order to say on to the next, they check the box, they've done what they needed to do? Is there a number you have in your brain?
Not for the Florida game so much. Look, I really think it's going to come down to that Louisville game and how you're going to look in that game because
Also,
I don't know. It's his first game down in Gainesville. You know, you're playing SEC team. I think a 17-13 game would be perfectly fine down there, but it's going to come down to the Louisville game. If you win that one, as your hypothetical said, if it's an ugly game, you win that one 17-13, and it kind of looks ugly. And then Alabama, you know, we go through the hypothetical again out. Then I think it becomes a conversation. Then I think you're holding your breath a little bit when those final standings come out. But yeah, if you go, but my point is, on the other hand, if you go down there and Louisville's whatever, ranked number 10, number 9, and you blow the doors off against them, you give the committee no option. They have to put Florida State in. It would look ridiculous if they didn't. So you would force their hand at that point. Don't give an option. So yes, and the fact that Kerrigan said that just lends more credence to that. I do think style points in the ACC championship game will go a long way to solidifying Florida State's spot in the playoffs, should all those other scenarios play out that way.
Gene, it's a bit of an inside joke here, but I know you'll get it. On a scale of a smooth Gulf Stream to a vacation flight you once took with an engine on fire as you landed on the runway, How do you feel it's going to be? That's a true story, folks. Maybe for an AWA with Gene, ask him about that
And
flight.
Corey's more afraid to fly than I am, so that tells you something there,
It's
why that is.
It's a harrowing tale. We were at a
Yes.
work lunch, and out of nowhere, he said, "Yeah, the engine was on fire." I thought we were all. I was, oh wow. So on a scale of smooth to bumpy,
Yes.
what do you say it's going to be over the next 2 games for Florida State?
Oh, the next 2 games? There's going to be some turbulence. I'm not going to doubt it. There's going to be some turbulence along the way. I just can't, the way this team has played, it's hard to believe they seem to play down their competition. What I don't know is, will they rise up because they know their leader's down? I'm very curious to see how they come out of this game down in Gainesville. Will that offensive line step up? Will Adam Fuller's defense, by the way, congratulations being nominated for the Broyles Award. Well deserved for Adam Fuller, who we were talking a couple of years ago, Tom, about is he going to get fired? And it tells you just the nature of college sports. Will that defense rise up?
Lester Atkins was a Broyles guy, so this Norvell guy knows how to hire coaches. So.
Yes, he does. He knows how to recruit, apparently, too, the number 3 class. So, yeah, I'm curious to see. I think the defense is going to rise up. I think we're going to be a little surprised. Now, they're playing a freshman quarterback, but Florida still has a lot of talent with ATN, those receivers. I mean, they get the job done down there. So I'll be very curious to see that. To me, it'll be the best sign for Florida State. If Florida State holds that team under, let's say, 20 points, I think that's a very positive sign going forward, because the way this team's going to impress me and maybe impress the committee is that defense stepping up. Because as they said, they got a lot of guys on that team. It's not just Jordan Travis.
Aslan, I feel like I might know the range by which you're projecting this game to go, maybe in terms of a score prediction. I feel like we might have had that discussion. You think it's going to be bumpy this week? Do you think it's going to be bumpy next week for Florida State as they try to steer this thing home to be 13-0 to honor number 13?
I mean, the talented teams they've played, it's been bumpy, right? I mean, other than LSU, I guess LSU even was kind of bumpy. Clemson game was bumpy. Duke game was bumpy. Miami game was bumpy. I think Florida is going to be a bumpy game. I think Louisville is going to be a bumpy game. There's no shame in that. You're finally playing good teams, and it seems like teams that have lines of scrimmage. Miami did not have a quarterback. Again, I don't think Florida's going to have a quarterback that they want, obviously, with Graham Mertz being out, but maybe Louisville is finally going to be that perfect storm that gives you a real nice quality win in front of everybody's eyes late in the season, because we know the LSU game obviously happened so long ago. But I think Florida State probably won't cover against Florida. I do think they'll win. And I don't know what I think the line is, maybe early 9-ish points against Louisville. I think Corey was saying on the podcast the other day. I think Louisville keeps it closer than that. But I guess, just win and do it. Have some flashes of goodness in those games. Maybe it doesn't have to necessarily be style like a 35-17 shellacking, but just moments where you look at that quarterback. If you're these people in this committee that don't see Tate Rodemaker practice every day and don't hear Mike Norvell talk about him and how much they like him, make you believe in what he can be for the team. Coach Norvell's on here, by the way. I'm gonna put one in the earbud here, see what he's got to say.
There we go. Gene, there's only 2 more of these left, as Aslan's going to get us a little report of what Coach Norvell says. My guess is he's going to skirt the issue. And Gene, I don't know if you watched from the press conference yesterday. It was a good answer from Mike Norvell when Corey asked him at the very end. He said, well, I'm not going to tell you a couple of weeks ago that none of this matters and all that matters is us. And then when we're in a situation like this, I'm going to put it on a different pedestal. But I think at this point, Commissioner Boo is telling you that style points do matter. And I think the manner in which Florida State wins matters. I don't know that it would have with Jordan Travis at quarterback, but I think it matters more now how they win, the style of which the way in which they win these games, if they can do the 13-0 season and win the next 2 games.
Yeah, that's a weird thing for he goes in again. Like I said, if he goes into that Louisville game and it's playing out the way we're afraid it might play out, what a weird dynamic's that going to be if they feel like they need to win putting style points. That's a bad situation to be in, because the goal is to win the game and you're playing a quality team. You could definitely screw some things up because you're trying to make a bigger play or do something out of your normal routine in a situation like that. Again, I hope it doesn't come to that. That'll be a night game. Maybe some stuff will be resolved by then and we'll know. I haven't looked at the schedule for next week. I don't think there's really anything this week that other than Louisville playing Kentucky, is there really anything coming up this week that's other than Florida State winning in Gainesville that Florida State fans need to worry about?
I don't think they can get helped, of course. if there's some kind of stunning upset.
Yeah,
where
I
it's-
don't think
where
you
it's-
really see Alabama losing to a team that just lost to New Mexico State.
No, I think Friday night, Civil War, Oregon State's your best hope for something where you start to feel a little bit of breathing room, but there are a bunch of one-loss teams right behind Oregon. So,
But does that matter? I mean,
Yeah.
as long as Oregon wins, I don't think that's going to matter. I mean, even if they lose, the Washington still needs to win out, in my opinion, for Florida State to worry about it.
Correct. I think if you're just looking to eliminate one-loss teams that could hop you, if you believe what Kirk Herbstreit's saying, and I don't
Okay.
know that he does.
You think this is a script? You're convinced he's just trying to
I think I think
poke
you
the
could play
barrel.
the hypothetical game. It's borderline WWE, in terms of making an argument. But I think if Florida State's 13-0, 2 Sundays from now, and I think I think he has to fly out to Bristol to do that final one, and he's sitting on that desk, he'll say they earned it. I mean, I'm gonna predict that now. He's gonna say I was, Tate Rodemaker proved it, and they've earned it. I think that's what he's gonna do in a couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to hear. And the last thing that we'll have before we sign off this evening is a synopsis from Aslan as to what Coach Norvell said to Reese Davis and the panel. But I think Florida State is still the bottom line here, whether we can get into doomsday one-loss scenarios or not, Gene. Florida State is in control of its college football destiny here. It's in control of whether or not it makes the college football playoff. Because if the offense performs well, all of the other players on offense are, relatively healthy, getting back healthy. All phases of the game for Florida State have been strong. The reason, Gene, that they were above Washington before this week, even though Washington had a better resume, was that in efficiency metrics, Florida State was more balanced than Washington was. So if the offense looks good, I don't think the committee's got any choice.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously what you hope there on that. Yeah, we're going to know a lot, I think, on Saturday. Just kind of how this team comes out, how they looks, how that line blocks. Robert Scott be out there. We'll have Renardo Green back out there to Loach. Is this team? Heck, what if Robert Scott goes out there and starts at tackle and plays a whole game? We haven't seen that all season. What if he's back to his own self? Then to me, and that's good, and they win the game, that's got to send a message to the committee. Like, what if Florida State has a running game?
Yeah.
Something we haven't seen all season. There's a lot of variables that could go into this game. We don't know how much some of these guys have been rested for this stretch run. Maybe they're in a position to do that. And how will Tate look? We don't know that either. Will Tate come out and take control of this team and look good? I mean, the benefit is you got a guy. How many teams have the benefit of having a guy that's been in the system for 4 years, has experience, has an arm like he has, and then has arguably the 2 best wide receivers in the nation to throw to?
It'll be interesting,
especially in the combination with tight ends he has. So I mean, the cupboard is not empty by any means. Although you'd love to have this guy behind me out there because he gives you. And I think that's the thing too. And the committee will never say it, but there's that factor, that X factor of having a guy that's a Heisman candidate, having a guy that's electric. You want to see that guy in the playoffs because it's gonna do TV ratings. It's gonna bring a lot of buzz. So that's in there too.
It'll be interesting. And Aslan, feel free to give the thumbs up after Mike is done and you're back. So no rush. Oh,
Joey's finally asked him like 7 questions in, finally get a question about dropping in there. And he said he's not going to talk to the team about it. They just are looking at this opportunity, controlling what they can control, which is to improve every day. They are confident in Tate. Kirk asked, what can Tate do? How much does the offense change? And he said, listen, Tate can do everything that we want. He can make every throw that's in our playbook. Says that they're a football team. They asked him like what the charge is to Tate to what he's being asked to do, what the charge of him this coming week is. And he said, listen, the charge to our entire football team. We are a football team. And he says that he's so excited about the way they care about each other. And he knows what they're made of. So he remains confident in how they can finish out this season. And it looks like Reese is wrapping him up.
So Jane says Mike looks pissed. Aslan, your own personal opinion.
He's usually up at like 4 a.m. He wants to be in bed right now. Yeah, I mean he wasn't his usual bubbly, smiling self, but I mean he's been up working for over 12 hours, so I'll come a little bit of slack there. I don't. Maybe he is peeved, but I mean he handled the question really well from Joey Galloway, who again after like 5 questions about what do you tell your defense, how do you prepare for a backup quarterback that Billy Napier has. Finally is asked about what does it mean to see your team fall down one spot and, just kind of laugh it off. I mean, Joey's like, listen, your fans are upset. I'm sure some of your players are going to be upset. what will you say to your team about the rankings? That it's not something we're going to talk about. We're just going to talk about the things that we can control, and that's to take advantage of the opportunity we have Saturday against Florida, which it sounds cheesy and it's so cliche and coach speak, but like that's what should give you confidence if you're a Florida State fan. Is that things aren't changing. Like what we saw at practice Tuesday, that was pretty par for the course of what they do, how they handle themselves. So they hammer that into their heads to be able to handle adversity when it presents themselves. And he mentioned that in the interview that they've faced adversity on the road and it's prepared them for this game, for this moment. So he remains confident in what they are and who they can be.
The Noles
maybe he's still a little pissed about the North Alabama trying for a field goal at the end of the game because he did look a little bit more dialed in. When I couldn't hear him, I know you heard Aslan. He looked very more serious than usual. Like usually with us, he's a little bit more jovial, and I've seen him kind of be happy-go-lucky on national interviews. He was completely dialed in and serious on this one. So yeah, maybe it's just he's putting on the game face at this point. Yeah. Hey, the one thing it's interesting to me that's never been brought up, and this is who goes into Clemson and beats them.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this. All the credit Ohio State got for beating Notre Dame. They couldn't do it. The Heisman Trophy candidate, maybe the number 1 or 2 overall draft pick, went in there this past weekend. He couldn't do it with a ranked team. Florida State sure did. But again, it doesn't seem to get brought up in these discussions when you're talking about resume.
At least the win over Clemson this week in the graphic had a number next to Clemson's name. Congratulations, Tigers. Welcome back into the playoff rankings. So way to go there at 7-4. They made their way back into the top 25. Maybe, just maybe, with a win over South Carolina so they can finish their season at a robust 8-4. The Tigers can give Florida State a bit of a feather in Florida State's cap as things close out here. This is a holiday week, a Thanksgiving week, and we want to wish everybody that's watching tonight on Warchant TV or listening to the podcast afterwards a happy Thanksgiving, a safe Thanksgiving. Please arrive where you're going safely and then get back in place to hang out with us for the rest of the week as we prepare for Florida State traveling down to Florida to try and go 12-0 for the third time since 2013. Before we sign off tonight with the holiday schedules, Aslan, I'll pass the ball to you first in terms of Wake Up Warchant schedules for this week in terms of the pod releases. Holiday week, everybody's got to go spend some time with the family, but what do you guys have in terms of the pod this week?
No days off over here, Tom. No days off. Every single day, rest of the week, we're dropping pods. Wow. This actually probably is the lion's share of the Wednesday podcast, by the way, everybody. So hello for making it this far into the podcast. But we got Zach Delatorre from Gators Online giving us a little bit of a preview of that. Corey gives us his observations on practice on Tuesday for your podcast on Wednesday. And then we got the 2-part mailbag over-unders on the Friday podcast, which you have to be a member of warchant.com to get involved with. And if you win, you get a $25 gift card to the Garnet and Gold. And if you don't win, you're still a subscriber to warchant.com. You get 10% off. But if you're a Warchant Gold member, you'd get what, 15% off, I think, now?
Yes, 15.
Yep.
So,
that's right. There it is. Warchant Gold. It's that top tier. Nicely segued. This is why he's a host and everything. This is what Aslan does.
He wears lots of hats. He's going to be a photographer this weekend. How about that down in Gainesville, Aslan?
Can't wait, G. I'll be by tomorrow, by the way, to pick that camera up after practice.
Field access. We love that. We love that. Last time Aslan had field access. Wait, did you do it for Pitt or was it Clemson?
It was Pitt. By the way, all-state playoff predictor, Georgia 75%, Ohio State, get off my screen, 63%, Florida State 60%.
60%. All right.
6 out of 10 with Tate. That's what they're saying. In the all-state.
Alabama only 23, and then Louisville 3%.
Oh. They have, hey, that's tripled in a week. They were at 1% last week. I do remember that, saying, way to go, All-State.
So when they play Florida State, it's going to be 9% next week, you're saying?
Yeah. I think State Farm playoff predictor would give Florida State a 95% because that's Russ Voorhis. That's our guy from a different program. But I think the State Farm predictor would say
it is. Noel Cab, thank you for the question. It should be available now. If you go and you click in the top right, your icon, your profile, and when the second tab on there is subscriptions, go to that. You'll see Warchant. You'll see upgrade. Click that. Assuming you're a subscriber, you'll be good to go. You can do that right now. If you're not a subscriber, you want to sign up, just go straight to the gold. You want to jump to the head of the pack, you can do that. Just go sign up and put in the code FSU Gold, all one word, and that'll get you. It's available right now for monthly or for an annual. And it'll prorate you to explain if you're an annual subscriber right now, and let's say you have 10 months left on your subscription, it'll just prorate instead of it being an additional $29.95, whatever that. My math's not good. It works out to $20 or whatever that would prorated would be for the rest of the year.
And it's 40% off through Cyber Monday.
Yep.
So there's the savings for you.
Mm-hmm.
I sheepishly will report that the Jeff Cameron Show is taking some time off tomorrow and Thursday.
Which you're not. You showed him up, Aslan.
No. I asked for it. That's what
they've been around a little bit longer. They're the Alabama.
All right. Yeah, they got that in their contracts. They got all holidays off.
Well, we're the upstart. We need quality points. Working on Thursdays.
He has, he's been around since the 90s. That guy, he's crazy. I was listening to him when I was driving English class.
He was interning when Fred Rouse was here. Where were you, Tom?
I was interning in 2009. So yeah, but he's been around forever. So he's taking some time. However, there will be a one-on-one interview with Andy Staples, on 3's Andy Staples, a UF deep dive on the channel with Jeff and Andy. That's coming up tomorrow on Warchant TV. The report's coming up on Warchant TV. We'll be back for a JCS live on Friday. Pre-game show Saturday at 6 p.m. Post-game show. Recruiting developments in between, perhaps, maybe, maybe. You'll see them here on Warchant TV. Hit the like button underneath the video. Subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. And head on over to warchant.com right now to become a gold member. Yes, a gold member. Warchant Gold. We hope to see you on the site side very soon. Thanks to Director Ben behind the scenes for his hard work tonight. Florida State not remains. See, I'm so used to that. Florida State drops to number 5 in the college football playoff ranking. We will be back next Tuesday to see where the Noles are after a 12-game regular season. So same bat time, same bat channel next week. He's Gene Williams, the founder administrator of Warchant.com. Aslan Hajavandi, the director of digital media at Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang. Good evening from everybody here at Warchant TV, and happy and a safe Thanksgiving to you all.